Over the weekend, the New York Jets solidified my thoughts on why, yeah, this team has a lot of problems. So, in a game that, despite the New York Jets' playoff chances being unlikely anyway, had some juice. This is a division rival. The Miami Dolphins have yet to beat anybody really that good this year. They have yet to beat anybody over 500. The New York Jets come into Miami and stink it up. And all the good vibes from the Texans win out the door. Zach Wilson's AFC Offensive Player of the Week out the door. I'm not going to blame this on Zach Wilson. It just kind of reaffirms me that he will not be back. Because this is, when the report came out a few weeks ago, I think part of the reason he was reportedly hesitant on coming back is the possibility of injury. And he's in concussion protocol and most likely will not be back next week, which means Trevor Siemian is probably going to be quarterback for the New York Jets next week. And not good. Not good. Trevor Siemian off the streets still can't play. And but that's not the reason why the Jets were so inept. And honestly, the defense wasn't great either, but how many times are you going to play good defense between a historically bad offense like this? The Miami Dolphins, they're playing for something. They're playing for playoff positioning. So they were coming off a really rough loss the week prior. So they're coming in. They have to get this. They're like, division, we're winning this game. And that's what they did. And this game, from a New York Jets perspective, the offensive line, just awful. And, that's what the Zach Wilson defenders will tell you. They're like, oh, the offensive line is so bad. It's so awful. How can any quarterback do anything? Even my dad would be like, what's Rodgers going to do behind that offensive line? And on some games, I agree. Like, that's why Aaron Rodgers is not returning. We're going to get to Aaron Rodgers in a second. Because I honestly think what he said on the Pat McAfee show is more newsworthy than the New York Jets lost to the Miami Dolphins. But just to go quickly back, yes, Aaron Rodgers got hurt behind this offensive line. I think it was more of a freak thing. I do not look at this Jets season, and I think despite the offensive line struggles, I don't think that's the number one reason why they are where they are. I just don't. I think if Aaron Rodgers was at quarterback, despite the offensive line issues, if he was healthy, the Jets would have like 9 wins. I still stand by that. And I know Jets fans that agree or disagree, or NFL fans that agree or disagree, and I'm just of the belief that that's the case. Because I look at certain games where the Jets won or where they lost, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's an issue if Aaron Rodgers is playing. I just don't. I think from their perspective, yes, the offensive line is garbage and needs to be tweaked, and that's on Joe Douglas, who I think is the number one person to blame this year. But a lot of this season has just been bad luck because Joe Douglas had a lot riding on Aaron Rodgers' health and the possibility of Zach Wilson learning under Aaron Rodgers, which was a reach. And it just goes to show, man, if you don't have a quarterback who could play well consistently, it's going to be really hard to win. And we've seen that all around the NFL this year is bad quarterback play. Tom Brady's been ranting about it himself on the Stephen A. Smith show, just on Instagram, and it's just like Tom Brady is acknowledging that the quarterbacks have been bad, but even some backup quarterbacks this year have been playing much better than Zach Wilson, who was supposed to be the franchise quarterback a few years ago. And I'm not saying the Jets aren't at fault to stunting his development, um, but and he hasn't played against under a good offensive line. He just hasn't. And Joe Douglas is the number one person to blame. He and Robert Saleh, I think, despite last week that I said that I think they will be back, I still think they will be back. I just don't understand with all the expectations how you could just be like, run it back without making any changes. This offensive line is broken at the moment. It just is. The offensive coordinator, the offense in general isn't good. It's historically bad. I mean, asking Aaron Rodgers to kind of fix all of that is a lot. I mean, I know it's one possession, but it's not like Aaron Rodgers was making crazy good plays on his first four plays with the New York Jets. And I know that's a cheap shot. I get it. I understand. It is because it kind of is. But part of me wonders, just part of me, if it's going to look like that when he comes back. And speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he came out and said on the Pat McAfee show, kind of what I was already thinking, but I think was nice to hear and refreshing from a Jets fan perspective because they've been through hell this year. And that's Aaron Rodgers plans on playing 2 years with the Jets and not next year, not just next year, which I think was really nice for Jets fans. And listen, I expect the Jets with a healthy Aaron Rodgers to be good next year. I do. And yes, Aaron Rodgers may not be the guy he was in Green Bay. In fact, I'm betting on that he won't be. But I think that's still a significant upgrade over Zach Wilson. I just do. And the quarterback position in general that the Jets have right now. But here's what Joe Douglas needs to do. He needs to get better targets for Rodgers. I think just one more, right? You got Garrett Wilson, you got a stud receiver, right? And with Aaron Rodgers, he'll make him look even better. You need a little more receiving help. Allen Lazard's pretty terrible, right? His guys in general that have come in just really haven't done it. The offensive line has to be tweaked and better. It just has to. And you need a veteran backup quarterback plan or just a quarterback plan in general that is not Zach Wilson. That's what you need. And since Aaron Rodgers said that, I also said this last week was that I'm not sure if Zach Wilson's going to be okay with riding the bench for 2 more years. I think he was maybe thinking this year, the next year maybe, but now 2 more years. I don't know, man. I think Zach Wilson, especially with only 1 year left on his contract, the Jets may look to trade him and try to boost up something else in their team, just get him out. Honestly, what most Jets fans thought they probably should have done this past offseason is get him off the team. Just in general, just get him off. Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback for what looks like the next 2 years, knock on wood, for them. And if that's the case, the Jets are going to be a playoff team. I think with an AFC that I still, even though it has a lot of depth, I still don't think there's a juggernaut team in the AFC like the NFC, where, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the 49ers are really good. And Kansas City's shown some real flaws this year. And I like the Ravens, but like I said before, Lamar Jackson has yet to prove it in the postseason. And the Dolphins, I mean, what have they done really? And the Bills are a mess. Like a lot of it is unstable. So the Jets can come in next year, tweak the offensive line. I also think they need to consider Robert Saleh. What are the odds Robert Saleh is coaching this team after next year? I don't know. Are they just going to give him a year? Another wasted year? I understand he was supposed to have Rodgers this year, and I think that's the reason. And it could just be, hey, we believe with a real quarterback he can do something. Maybe, but I'm looking at all the penalties, man. I mean, who's that on? Who's that on? I mean, I was watching the Giant game. There was a commercial break, and I quickly turned on the Jet game, and without even 5 seconds of watching the game, 5 seconds, there was a flag on the Jets. I mean, that's hilarious. I know a lot of that is timing, but still, it's hilarious, hysterical. And even a team like the Giants, who isn't great, who, committed a lot of penalties early on in the year, haven't lately. And I turn on the Jets, boom, flag. Right away. I mean, little of that has to go on Saleh, no? And in a league where a lot of offensive-minded coaches have success, you got a defensive guy like Saleh, the Jets haven't done a lot of winning while he's been there. And a lot of that isn't his fault. But at least some of it has to be. But like I said before, it's Joe Douglas that's the main problem here. Main problem. And he's got his, listen, if he's going to stay, which I think he will, he's got to look at the coach, see if there's better options. And that's if, there are better options. Don't hire just random dude. Got to look at the coach. Have to. Even though a lot of it is his fault. Got to look at the coach. Got to look at your quarterback position, despite Rodgers saying he's going to be there for 2 years. And you got to look at your receiving core, see, okay, can we get one more target for our wideouts? Your running game with Brees Hall is good, and you got to fix the offensive line because the defense is fine. But that's a lot to fix in a summer. And it's going to be up to him to do it. And maybe Aaron Rodgers fixes everything. I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe we're counting so many flaws for the Jets when the real one is they don't have good, consistent quarterback play. I mean, do we really think Aaron Rodgers would be this bad still? Like, do you think he would be playing as well as Zach Wilson is right now, or as good as bad as Zach Wilson is right now, just because the O line is bad? I'm not saying he wouldn't get hurt or anything. I'm not saying he wouldn't be as good, but he's got to be better than Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson just isn't a great quarterback. Trevor Siemian is a bad quarterback. Tim Boyle's not a good quarterback. Like, the options aren't good. And for Douglas to not have that prepared is kind of crazy. So in the offseason, they have to look at stuff as a veteran. Just give Zach Wilson, if you're going to keep him, which I don't think they will, I think they'll trade him, just have him compete against somebody. So the next year, you got to play it. But the Jets need to make several changes. As far as the rest of the season goes, like I said, you see what you have. Go in. If this team quits and gets blown out in the last 3 straight games, don't we look at Saleh? Don't we look at that and be like, well, this coach doesn't really, it's fine, we're tanking, whatever. What? You know what I mean? Like, if they competed in the next few games but lost, that's one thing. But if they just flat out quit against you, I mean, that's not good.